This is Combat Mania on the Undetermined Podcast Network.
You're listening to Combat Mania, a cheap seat sports production, part of the Undetermined Podcast Network. Oh my goodness, we are back. This is Albano once again. We are back for Combat Mania. It has been such a while. I forget how long it's been. It's been about 2 months. It's been about 2 months since we last had an episode, and I do want to apologize. So where have I been? Well, I remember last time I reached out to anybody for Combat Mania purposes, it was around December, because I think it was December 9th when we had all those big fights in one night, like Glory Kickboxing was having stuff, and the UFC had a card, Bellator had a double card, it was boxing. It was a night full of action. And that was the last time I ever did anything. And then I had school stuff to do, grad school stuff, in what is hopefully my last semester now. And then it was just the holiday season, and I was just pretty much burnt out from podcasting at that point. I was working through the Unspoken podcast, completely burnt out. We had our 50th episode a month ago. Yeah, it would be a month ago, because we did it around New Year's time. We've been trying to make that podcast grow, but gotta give some love back to this podcast, so here we are. Episode number 9. So, we've had quite a bit of happenings within the last month. It has been quite an interesting January in the combat world. So let's sit back and review. And you know what? For this first segment, I'm going to do both the wrestling transition and the MMA transition here. Because there's something that's happened where if you have slept under a rock, then you would have no idea. But if you haven't been sleeping under a rock, you should have heard about this by now. So we will be talking about that certain person, that certain female former UFC champion. But also, last week or 2 weeks ago, I forget, on my Cheap Seat Sports site, Cheap Seat Sports, my little blog, I posted a couple of articles, 5 questions that must be answered. One was for boxing, one was for wrestling, and one was for MMA. So, I'm going to pretty much talk about those articles and explain them and what those 5 questions are. But within this last month, a couple of them have gotten some answers. So, first off, as I said, I'm going to play both the wrestling transition sound and the MMA transition sound, because there's one story that overlaps everything, and it's so big it runs into mainstream. So the WWE held Royal Rumble, the pay-per-view, a few days ago, and I have to say it was a very, very good pay-per-view card. It was excellent. I told a friend afterwards, I think Elimination Chamber has been given a run for its money. I don't know how it's going to surpass this year's Royal Rumble. I don't know how Fastlane is going to surpass Royal Rumble. Hell, I don't even know if WrestleMania 34 is going to surpass the Royal Rumble. If WrestleMania 34 is anything like the Royal Rumble was this past Sunday, it's going to be an excellent WrestleMania, but that's then, and this is now, and what's now is at the end of Royal Rumble, we had a big WWE debut. We had the debut of one former UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion and former Olympic bronze medalist in Judo in 2008, Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey, it has been speculated for some time that she would make her big return, or rather her big debut in the WWE, her big return into mainstream, I would say. And there were rumors that she was going to be the number 30 entrant in the Women's Royal Rumble, the first ever Women's Royal Rumble in WWE history, which was won by Asuka. But that didn't happen. It said number 30 was Trish Stratus, and we exited the Women's Royal Rumble match, thinking maybe nothing's going to happen. So Asuka, at the end of the match, after she won, she was in the middle of the ring. Charlotte enters the ring because she's SmackDown Women's Champion and was at ringside. Raw Women's Champion Alexa Bliss is also at ringside. She enters the ring, so Asuka's surrounded by both champions, and it looks like she's going to be making her decision now. Who is she going to face at WrestleMania? And then Bad Reputation hits. And on the Titantron, you see Ronda Rousey in the old font that Hot Rod, legendary wrestler Roddy Piper, the font of what the word Hot Rod would be, that in that font it said Ronda Rousey, and then Ronda Rousey comes out in this big jacket. It actually was a jacket that Roddy Piper used to wear, and a shirt that says Hot Ronda in that same font on it. And Ronda Rousey goes around, she comes out smiling, she goes around, shakes some fans' hands. She's doing a lot of pointing, basically, to sum up her little appearance at the end of the Royal Rumble. She points at the WrestleMania sign, and she shakes Stephanie McMahon's hand. Stephanie McMahon was at ringside on commentary for the match. And, it was a fairly booked Women's Royal Rumble. I was fine with it. There was a lot of nostalgia, but that was definitely the big moment to close out the show. And then, of course, at the end of the show, after it went off the air, after Royal Rumble went off the air, ESPN broke the news that Ronda Rousey had signed a deal with the WWE. Don't know the details of it, don't know how long it's for, how much she's making, but it is a full-time deal, first of all, which means she's not going to be a Brock Lesnar or a John Cena where she only shows up every now and then for the big pay-per-views. She's going to be a full-time member of the roster, reportedly. And yeah, so Ronda's going to be there every single week, I guess, even though she wasn't on Raw this past week. Although they did a lot of talk about, Ronda Rousey debuted, and Ronda's debut caused a little bit of criticism, let's say. And it's a fair point, and it is a fair point when I say that there were some WWE superstars, female superstars, who were pretty pissed about how it was booked, how Ronda came out last, and that's how the pay-per-view ended, because there's a lot of people who felt like WWE pretty much undermined the history of the first ever Women's Royal Rumble. And in fact, the Women's Royal Rumble main evented the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. The Men's Royal Rumble was a little earlier in the card, and we'll get to that. Although I will preview it by saying I think this was the best Men's Royal Rumble we've had in years. Like at least maybe 10 years. And it's just a shame that such an excellent Royal Rumble had to come when, the Women's Royal Rumble, the first ever Women's Royal Rumble, and under any circumstances, the Men's Royal Rumble should have been the main event, but this was a big history-making moment for the women, and so I guess I understand where certain people are coming from when they say, Ronda's debut undermined the women in that match. But honestly, I don't know. This one, Ariel Helwani had an opinion, on that criticism. It's like, you can't spoil a big debut like that. A big debut, that's how it's got to be made. I mean, there had been rumors for some time, because Ronda Rousey, of course, she had the WrestleMania 31 segment with The Rock and Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. She appeared at the Mae Young Classic, having that confrontation with her four horsewomen, with the four horsewomen of WWE, that of course being Charlotte, that of course being Bayley, Sasha Banks, and Becky Lynch. But still, there were a couple of reports over the last few months that she had begun her training at the Performance Center, and it's like, you're training at the Performance Center, and I think Dave Meltzer mentioned this on Monday's MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, that you can't train at the Performance Center, the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, unless you have a contract, which means that basically Ronda probably was signed, and we don't know how long this was for, and it was just a matter of how are we introducing Ronda and what's her big thing going to be. But yeah, you can't really spoil a debut. I thought it was fine. And it left me in shock at the end of the pay-per-view, oh my god, I have to watch Raw tomorrow, or oh my god, that just happened, I'm so shocked, and it sticks in my mind for hours and hours and now days after the show. That's a good ending. That's a good ending to a pay-per-view. That's what you want. That's what WWE should want. But I do understand maybe the little bit of criticisms it undermines the Women's Royal Rumble. Now, Ronda's debut specifically, what she did and everything, meh. I mean, I'm starting to get won over by, it wasn't enough for her to appear. I mean, it was fine how she appeared and everything, but, Meltzer was talking about this on Monday, how she basically came out and it looked like she was playing wrestler. And, Ronda should not be coming out playing wrestler. You get what I mean? She was happy to be there and everything, and it's Ronda, she's a killer. She was a bona fide killer in the UFC until she was knocked out by Holly Holm, and then went on that basically disappeared out of the UFC eye for a little while, and then she returned over a year later and got knocked out actually TKO'd, I should be specific, in 46 seconds by Amanda Nunes. And Meltzer pretty much wants her to be that credible beast again, and I would actually understand it. I would be for it. The only thing that I disagree with what Meltzer said was what her first WrestleMania match should be. Well, what her first match should be, and everyone's in agreement, from Meltzer to me to the casual fan to everything. Ronda's first match has to be at WrestleMania. She debuted in shocking fashion at the Royal Rumble. It would be a shame to give that match away for free on Raw, or to give it away at Elimination Chamber or a live event. It should be at WrestleMania, because that's just Ronda's name. She has a name. She has a brand. And that's what you really want to do with brands. You want to put them in the biggest spotlights possible. So I feel like Ronda, I get it. She should play Beast, but I mean, at the expense of the women's division, I should be more specific. Context is necessary, as we would say on the Unspoken podcast. So Meltzer further went on to say that his idea for a WrestleMania debut for Ronda Rousey would be against Asuka, because Asuka is the woman that they have built up all this time in WWE. She's been undefeated for 2 years or so. she now uses pretty much the armbar as a submission. She has the armbar and the Asuka lock as finishing moves, which are both submissions. It's like they have this whole thing of nobody's ready for Asuka, and his thought on it is that Ronda Rousey should beat Asuka and beat her in tremendous fashion, quick fashion, make her tap in like 60 seconds. No! No! That's stupid. Honest to God, stupid. If you're going to go around and criticize that Ronda Rousey's debut undermined and caused less attention for the Women's Royal Rumble, I saw Nikki Bella tweeting something. I saw Nia Jax especially tweeting like, when WWT's like something historic that happened at Royal Rumble, and she was like, you mean the 30 women who were participating in the first ever historic Women's Royal Rumble? I guess WWE could have worded their tweet better or their little preview better, like, should have said something like, so much history was made at the Royal Rumble, because, a matter of fact, also, more history, those of you not aware, didn't, it didn't come to mind. It was the first time that an Asian superstar won the Royal Rumble, and WWE pulled that off twice in the night, because you had Asuka winning the Women's Royal Rumble at the end of the night, and earlier in the night you had Shinsuke Nakamura winning the Men's Royal Rumble, and we will get to the Men's Royal Rumble later on. But still, Dave Meltzer said that Ronda should be pretty much the female Brock Lesnar, even managed by Paul Heyman. I was discussing this with a friend earlier, and he basically said, oh God, that means Ronda's not going to talk. And he said, like, in the UFC, Ronda had the ability to talk. You're basically making Ronda lose charisma. And because my friend had said, oh, but we've heard Ronda talk in the UFC. We know she can talk. And I'm just saying, it's very different when you have Vince McMahon and his creative team, should I say. Well, how would Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe do it? Mr. McMahon! Or let's do Broken Matt or Woken Matt, whatever. Meek Mahan is writing the scripts, and everything is so scripted. Because I think maybe only Rock can go off script and not even that much. Maybe Cena can go off script and not even that much. I don't even know if Paul Heyman can go off script that much. So everything is heavily scripted today in the WWE. So I don't know how that would work. And they want to do, reportedly, this big blow-off of Ronda Rousey and The Rock versus Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. And of course, we don't know if The Rock will be able to appear at WrestleMania. Because, he's a big movie star and everything. Are they worried, that are they worried that The Rock will be injured? I mean, maybe. I mean, it's happened before. WrestleMania 29, he got injured, and that caused his production of a couple of his movies to be, delayed. So I guess Hollywood has a little fear of that. Although Meltzer did get something wrong of, like, why didn't do it at WrestleMania 32? I mean, why didn't they do this match at WrestleMania 32? Yeah, it could have made sense. It should have made sense, but first of all, Ronda had lost her title by that point, so she was pretty much damaged goods, and she was also, really upset about the loss, nearly to the point of suicide. And by the way, to sidetrack, Ronda Rousey, she has to get over those two losses, the losses to Holman Nunez. If she wants to be in the WWE, this is where the stone face, killer gimmick I agree with. She cannot, be thinking about those losses and be happy. I'm happy for her. I'm happy that she is happy and she is somewhere she wants to be. But, she can't, like we were saying, this is the part of she can't play wrestler, I agree with. She has to leave the UFC. Those UFC losses, they have to belong in the past. They have to be in the past. She has to keep looking forward to the future. And the future is the WWE. Because right now, I mean, the things that she did in the UFC mattered, of course. And that's all part of her gimmick. And her history and how she's going to be booked. But still, you know, what happens if she has to take a loss in the WWE? Is she going to be upset? Is she going to want creative control? Creative control, brother. And want to win? Like, no. If she has to be willing to eat losses. I mean, heaven forbid, what if she's asked to tap out? What if, a random thought in my head, because I mentioned the Asuka situation before, that Meltzer suggested she beat Asuka, which again I think is stupid. Like, oh, WWE did Ronda Rousey's debut wrong, and the Royal Rumble, the Women's Royal Rumble was, you know, it lacks the attention now. Like, everyone should have, you know, been talking about that instead of talking about Ronda. Or should have been talking about both, but they're only talking about Ronda. So, what's this best solution? Oh, let's have the Royal Rumble winner, the Women's Royal Rumble winner, job in like 60 seconds, and then, you know, not get the title shot. And so stupid. That would be the worst. At that point, the Women's Royal Rumble would be absolutely damaged goods. We don't even know if they would have it again. Or should have it again. It's stupid. The only solution that I see coming from that would be Asuka disappearing from WWE TV for a while, over those 9 months or so, debut the likes of Shayna Baszler and Jessamine Duke and everything, and then have Asuka return at the next Women's Royal Rumble, the next Royal Rumble event in 2019, win that, become the stone-faced killer, basically, take out everybody from Duke to Baszler, anybody associated with Ronda Rousey, even if Paul Heyman was at that point associated with Ronda, take him out, and then have some no-holds-barred match at WrestleMania 35 in 2019, and make Ronda tap out in the main event. Like, the main event. It's like, either this year or next year, maybe the year after 36, one of them, one of the women's titles is going to be the main event of WrestleMania. It's a no-brainer at this point, especially if somebody like Ronda Rousey is the challenger or the champion in the match. But yeah, like I said, heaven forbid, what if she has to lose a match? She can't, you know, they can build her up, but, you know, nobody is undefeated forever in professional wrestling, especially making to WWE. John Cena's not undefeated. Randy Orton's not undefeated. The Rock's not undefeated. The Undertaker's not undefeated. Just, I like the debut. I don't know. I like the debut. I understand where he's coming, where the likes of Meltzer and other fans are coming from, and that it kind of undermined the other, you know, the Women's Royal Rumble match, or that she has to, quote, not play wrestler. But still, I like the debut, and I mean, if they're going to go to tag team route and The Rock, you know, isn't available, I don't know, throw Braun Strowman in there, because it would make sense. If it's Braun and Rousey against Triple H and Stephanie, Braun has the issues with Triple H. Going back to Survivor Series, if you all remember that, how Braun pretty much made Triple H scared shitless. And Braun's been a hell of a beast. He's a monster face now. I'd probably say the biggest baby face on that roster. And if WWE is truly not going to put Braun in the Universal title match, if they're going to truly push for Roman Brock 2, well then put Braun in there. Makes kind of sense. They just have to be booked in a way where basically Braun and Triple H get their time, and even though Stephanie's not a wrestler, I think they got to do something where Rousey can get over in this, Braun can get over in this. It'd be tricky, but I think it could be done. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Ronda Rousey. And furthermore, it's also a good signing for the WWE. Here's basically what I was talking about in the article, because one of my questions on the WWE for 2018 was, when would Ronda Rousey debut? Basically, there was going to be a storyline that's the thing. The tag team WrestleMania match, or the one-on-one with Asuka, whatever you want to say, wasn't even supposed to be the original thing. It was supposed to be the horsewomen versus the horsewomen. But I mean, there's a lot of, stable wars going on with WWE. I mean, on Raw you have Absolution, SmackDown especially, because you have the Riot Squad. You have, I don't know, the Welcoming Committee, is it even a thing anymore? Because I see them teaming up, but it's like, they're not being, the Welcoming Committee after, Charlotte debuted. But also Charlotte, Becky, and Naomi are teaming up every now and then. Charlotte and Becky, of course, are a phenomenal team. Came in together with Paige originally, 2.5 years ago. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Ronda. But it's also a great signing for the WWE, because another one of the questions I asked was about Alpha Entertainment. And this is where a bit of the unspoken podcast would come into it, because, of course, the question would be, AKA, is the XFL truly coming back? And the day that I published the article and promoted it on social media, of course, was the day that Vince McMahon would go on to announce that the XFL is returning. It's going to be an 8-team season. 10-week season, semifinals and a championship. And I mean, if you want more information about the XFL, go listen to the Unspoken podcast, last week's episode, and the one that's coming this weekend. Because in both episodes we do briefly touch upon the return of the XFL, especially more in last week's episode 54. But Vince McMahon put $100,000 reportedly from WWE stock and invested it into a company called Alpha Entertainment. But basically, Vince McMahon said, the reason why I have invested in Alpha Entertainment is because now I alone am responsible for the success or for the failure of the XFL. And originally, the Alpha Entertainment thing was maybe he could have been a potential bidder for the Carolina Panthers. And I'm like, that kind of doesn't make any sense, because Vince McMahon was uber aggressive in 2001 when the XFL was first around and flopped. The NFL has softened up. And, the XFL is going to be real football. But of course, it seems like Vince has taken a change on that stance, because, of course, the XFL of back then would not survive in today's more politically correct, more cultured world. It wouldn't survive. It would not, get any good positive publicity, but it still wouldn't make sense for Vince to be doing Carolina Panther stuff, because I could go on about the potential bid by P. Diddy and potentially Colin Kaepernick. Of course, we haven't heard much on the Carolina Panthers situation, but it would make sense for Vince because, Vince has been... We just had the 25th anniversary of Raw, right? Vince McMahon has been competing against Monday Night Football for 25 plus years. He's been competing against the NFL for 25 plus years. Hell, maybe if you count, some super... Actually, I wasn't around when Superstars... I wasn't around much when Superstars, was on Sundays. And Superstars sometimes was like, syndicated show. So you really don't know how that affected the head-to-head thing. But, Vince has been competing against the NFL for a while. If he took the Carolina Panthers, I wonder how he would handle talking to the media and stuff. Would he bash Goodell? Because the point of the XFL is to kind of make up some ground for, he wants to do things correctly that Goodell has failed at, basically. Now, if you want to believe it or not is another story. But it still wouldn't make sense for him to own the Carolina Panthers because of that reason. And furthermore, he's on Monday night. He's competing head-to-head with Monday Night Football. the Carolina Panthers would never be playing on Monday Night Football ever again as long as he held them. And Carolina Panthers, as much as I dislike Cam Newton, they are a fine team. They are a team people want to see. So, Monday night, big night for football, and at the same time, the NFL players want to get rid of Thursday night football because, injuries and everything. And if it came down to, all 32 owners had to agree to remove Thursday night football, and, it wouldn't happen because Vince would be the one, because he would say, suck it up, Buttercups, you're playing on Thursday night, because that's the only prime time he could do for the Carolina Panthers if he owned them. It would only be Thursday night or Sunday night's prime time, because why would he want, his team to go up against, in the ratings, against his baby, Monday Night Raw? It would have made no sense. And if they would have told him, okay, but, no promotion for Raw, or you got to cut some of Raw, it would be unacceptable to Vince. Because, I don't know how he would harm, he would not want to harm Monday Night Raw. But the revival of the XFL, Ronda Rousey's debut, you know what it's all important about? Ratings. And not just ratings. Good for television, because WWE's television rights are up next year. I think around September 2019, WWE and NBC Universal, their deal is up. So I've been questioning, what's the future of WWE TV? Because reportedly they want a deal done like this summer or early in the fall, somewhere around there. You have WWE testing out the waters of social media with the Mixed Match Challenge on Facebook Watch, although it's only exclusive to US viewers, so this is more of a US television deal, because over in Canada they have TSN on the score. I don't know what it's like all around the world, but in the US, it doesn't seem to be doing as well as they would have hoped. So, in terms of people watching, so maybe it won't be with Facebook Live or Amazon or any other, any of those services. So what is the future of WWE television? Well, and here's more of where MMA comes in. WWE could stay with NBC Universal, but they have a potential another bidder in One Fox Sports. So, let me give some backstory to make more sense of this. So, in the 5 questions for MMA, the article, one of the questions I asked is what's going to happen to UFC's TV deal here in the United States. That deal is going to expire later this year, I think August or September of 2018. And UFC is fielding offers from other outlets. They had exclusive negotiations with Fox, but those two are far apart from the deal. UFC wanted $450 million a year. Fox only wants, to give them $200 million a year. There's not much of an update as to who's in the lead, quote unquote, for UFC. But Sports Business Daily's John Orrid actually just said this. Quote, I have an inkling that once the AT&T deal gains approval, he's referring to the potential merger between AT&T and Time Warner, that Turner's David Levy would sign a big-time media rights deal that would put UFC on all AT&T platforms. Imagine UFC fights on True TV, pay-per-view cards on DirecTV, mobile programming on AT&T Wireless, over-the-top rights on Turner's planned sports service. A caveat, if the AT&T deal is rejected or if it takes too long, UFC could cut a deal with Fox around $250 million that would see Fox give up shows like Ultimate Fighter that UFC could shop elsewhere. Amazon also showed some early interest, but will ultimately pass on a UFC deal. So basically, I don't know. And because the UFC... Actually, Dave Meltzer also talked about this. I have some audio for this. That, of course, was Dave Meltzer talking to Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour last Monday, which I referenced earlier in the program during their early conversations about Ronda Rousey and all the TV deals and stuff. The UFC has recently. The UFC had a show on Saturday. It was a UFC on Fox. The main event was Jacare Souza and Derek Brunson. And it got a rating of, I don't know what the rating specifically was, when those 0 points or 1 point. I think it was a 1.5 because it was 1.5 million viewers basically. And that is the lowest rating ever in the history of this television deal between UFC and Fox that's been in effect since 2011. And the numbers have slipped from year to year. Like 2015, 2016 to 2017, there has been a tremendous ratings loss for the UFC. And I know maybe that has to deal with how people are watching sports. We all think, sports are invulnerable to the DVR craze. That's what we thought because, sports is live entertainment. It's something you have to watch live, but maybe it's in the ways that, people are consuming media, whether it's through social media services or streaming services like Amazon Prime or Facebook Watch. But basically, it's been tough on the UFC, basically, this deal with Fox. So now, truthfully, I don't think the Ultimate Fighter should be around anymore, but that's neither here or there, or they gotta fix it somewhat. But again, that's neither here or there. I think the thing is, the UFC is reaching for the money. And I say reaching because they want $450 million, but where's their star talent? Where's their star talent, okay? Let me go through the rest of the questions I put for MMA in 2018. Does Conor McGregor ever fight again? Because they're promoting this match at UFC 223 between Tony Ferguson, who's the interim champion, and Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is the number one contender. And that fight is being billed as for the undisputed championship, but Dana White is refusing to say that Conor McGregor is stripped. So we're going to have two world champions? That's unheard of. That's professional wrestling shit. I'm sorry. What is this? How has Conor McGregor been champion 14, 15 months, not made one title offense, and he's... People cannot... I love Conor and his antics and how he's humble afterwards, and I love his fighting, but you cannot be 14, 15 months champion, and the division is stacked, and you're not making any title defenses. I'm sorry. It can't happen like that. Conor McGregor never defended the featherweight championship, and he was stripped of it in like 11 months, and it wasn't even by him, because it was like 2 weeks after he had won the lightweight championship and became the first time same time double champ in UFC history. But there was a change in the main event of UFC 206, and because of that, they had to change it to the co-main event got promoted, which ended up being Max Holloway versus Anthony Pettis. They wanted something on the line because the UFC can't sell pay-per-views anymore, I guess, without something on the line because of the theme of the supercard and, the big money fights and everything. So they stripped Conor of a title so that way they can have a title on the line. Well, they gave it Conor's original featherweight title to Jose Aldo's just so they can take the interim title that Jose had and put it on the line in Holloway versus Pettis. But it's just... I don't get it. I mean, there's a whole other conversation that could be had about the UFC and money fights and, supercards. How every pay-per-view has to have something. But I mean, they're focusing so much on, having some stuff so big for the pay-per-views that it's they're ignoring, I don't want to say ignoring, but look what they're doing with the Fox events and the FS1 events. The Fox card from this past week, like I said, was Jacare Souza versus Derek Brunson. Both good fighters, but a little lower in the I don't want to say lower in the rankings, but it's a rematch from Strikeforce from 2012. But do any of them have some real popularity? Are they really fighters that the casuals want to see? Probably not, and it's bad because that's a Fox card. Not a FS1 card, a Fox card. So, that's when the average viewer, and those who, don't have cable, if they have a television, they can watch network television, they can watch Fox. So, that's bad on their part. And I've got a bad feeling that this coming FS1 card is going to do worse. Let's look at that card from this Saturday. You have Lyoto Machida against Eric Anders. That's your main event. Machida is not as good as he once was, and Anders, who? Who the fuck is that guy? You have Valentina Shevchenko making her women's flyweight debut, the former challenger for the women's bantamweight title. And why is that the third to last match? Why is the co-main event John Dodson versus Pedro Munoz? Why? I question this card. There are a lot of, guys I've never heard of and casuals aren't going to be interested in. So bad cards, you're not going to have Conor McGregor, because let's face it, Conor McGregor may not ever have to fight again. McGregor's hinting at a return to MMA, but now Floyd Mayweather Jr., I don't want to play the boxing sound effect right now. Fuck it. Let's play the boxing sound effect. So, there's video footage on social media that Floyd Mayweather Jr., the 50-0 legendary boxing fighter. He's in a gym, and he enters a cage. It's the octagon. I'm like, no. When I see that footage, I'm like, no. I don't want to go through this shit again. Please, we had one money fight. We don't need another. Is there going to be a third now and there's going to be a professional wrestling match? Jesus fuck. Look. I get it. The UFC needs Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor doesn't need the UFC. But why are you holding up a division like this? Look at the stat. Look at all the talent that you have in the lightweight division. You have Tony Ferguson, who of course is the interim champion. You have Khabib Nurmagomedov, who destroyed Edson Barboza back at UFC 209. I don't remember scorecards from the judges, where all three of them were 30-25, 30-24, that's insanity. Khabib destroyed Edson. That's the most feared man in the division, I think. He's probably the man that should and probably will be the champion, pending, of course, he can make weight. Those two have been pushing for fights with McGregor. And you got Eddie Alvarez. You got Justin Gaethje. Basically, you've got a bunch of UFC contenders at lightweight, and they can't do much because they don't have a champion. This championship situation is so shitty. I'm sorry. And especially if there's going to be another money fight somehow, he's got to vacate the title. We need to move on with this division. Now, back to this. Back to this situation, the UFC, because I was just going on about their stars. Well, you don't have Conor McGregor. You don't have Jon Jones. And since it's now February, this is the month where one of these days we're going to find out what Jon Jones' fate is from that one drug test where he tested, two drug tests, that he tested positive, the in competition and out of competition for UFC 214 back in the summer. He faces up to a 4-year ban from MMA. His career might as well be over. And even if it's not, the UFC will probably get rid of him once and for all after being such a headache. And then once John Jones comes back, hi John Jones, welcome to fucking Bellator. And I mean, I like Bellator, but I mean, come on. Also, you have no Michael Bisping, because Bisping's on his road to retirement. GSP, he won the middleweight title, got diagnosed with colitis or something like that, and had to vacate the title. So now Robert Whittaker is the champion, but Whittaker is injured. And he got misdiagnosed with a staph infection. Like, the staph infection didn't get treated right, and it ate away at his organs. What star power do you have? What star power do you have that puts you in the position to go $450 million, please, from Fox? And you know what? Vince McMahon is a genius, because once the UFC and Fox part ways, and I've got a good feeling that they're going to part ways. I mean, sure, the Thursday Night Football deal is a different kind of deal, but the Thursday Night Football, Fox acquiring Thursday Night Football, to me was more of a sign of telling the UFC, we're more interested in investing in stuff like this than your company, because you haven't been producing the ratings we want. So, with that, I mean, WWE produces 52 weeks of content a year. There will always be content. They can fill FS1 and FS2 up with content. Fox may have wanted, to purchase WWE, a rumor, at least. And maybe Raw has to go back to 2 hours, but as much as I say Vince McMahon, wouldn't want to damage Raw and stuff, I think, like, a move for Fox? For Raw to potentially be on local Fox networks? Competing against, the rest of the primetime shows on Monday night? Holy shit. This is genius. Not to mention the XFL. WWE's TV rights are going to be insane. And if Fox acquires those, holy shit. We could be looking at something here. Something big. And the UFC, they got to redevelop. I mean, what they're going to do. They have to rebuild with stars. I mean, to put it in perspective, you know how UFC used to be on Spike? Well, when the last UFC card on Spike, which I think Ariel mentioned, I forget what the specific event was, but the main event, I think, was Michael Bisping versus Jason Mayhem Miller. And that had 3 million viewers. This Fox card, like a network, 1.5 million. That's bad. They finished last in every demographic except for 18 to 49-year-old males. I think that's what the demographic was. But basically, young adults and adults. And male adults at that. That's not good. That's not good. So, UFC, I don't know what position you're in to suggest, we want $450 million, because they're not deserving of $450 million. Not with the stars that they have. I mean, a bunch of people, of course, have jumped ship to go to Bellator. Over the last couple of years, as I mentioned in the 5 Questions for MMA for 2018 article, Bellator has managed to secure Chael Sonnen, Rory McDonald, Wanderlei Silva, Gegard Mousasi, Roy Nelson, Matt Mitrione, Benson Henderson. And they've got Fedor Emelianenko. They've got their own stars that they have built up, including Bobby Lashley, and he just left Impact. So hopefully he'll be around to compete more in Bellator. And maybe challenge for the heavyweight championship one day. Douglas Lima, Michael Chandler, the Pitbull Brothers, AJ McKee, Eduardo Dantas, James Gallagher. Like, they've got their own pit of stars. Maybe Bellator can actually make strides this year. Especially now that Spike is now the Paramount Network, and they're going to try to, I guess be more professional or somewhat. They're not, I don't think Paramount is showing Cops reruns every day now for 15 hours or whatever it was, but at least Bellator is an alternative to the UFC. Is it ever going to top the UFC? I doubt it. but it can be an alternative. It can be a good number 2. It can get bigger and better here. So it's a good opportunity for them. And the last question I had for 5 questions for MMA. So let me get into the 5 questions now for the rest of the 5 questions for MMA and wrestling. I only have one more for MMA. The Ali Act, it protects boxers from things like exploitation and match fixing, and mandates promoters disclose fighter payments and contracts. And the championships and contender ranking systems go to independent sanctioning bodies. Remember, in boxing, there is no such thing as like a UFC or a Bellator. It's the championship belts, and it's the WBA, the WBC, and IBF. Promoters for cards, that's stuff like Mayweather Promotions or Golden Boy Promotions. Stuff like that. The UFC, of course, has its own ranking system, and it refers to only UFC fighters. It doesn't take into account fighters from all around the world. And that's where ESPN has UFC fighters, Bellator fighters, etc. So, I mean, if the act is extended into MMA, it could be beneficial for fighters who are all employed as independent contractors and they don't have a union. But there's a possibility, of course, that stuff like how pay-per-view for the UFC and how Bellator events are booked, that could be flipped upside down forever. So if the Ali Act gets extended, I mean, great for fighters, but let's be careful here only about, let's see. We need to know the specifics. How will it help the UFC fighters? How will it help Bellator fighters and MMA fighters in general? And how is it going to change how promotions, let's call it promotions for UFC and Bellator, are booking stuff like? And how are the championships handled and everything? I want specific answers for this. And hopefully they do that before it gets signed into law, if it does get signed into law, because, President Trump and Dana White are friends. If this hurts Dana White's business, would President Trump be willing to sign it? I doubt it. Also with wrestling, how will New Japan and ROH fare? I mean, I'm not worried about New Japan and Ring of Honor, even NXT, because it seemed like we had a little concern last year, with NXT taking all the indie stars, and all these stars like Finn Balor, Shinsuke Nakamura, Bobby Roode going up to the main roster. How will it affect, NXT and the indies? Like, are those two scenes going to dry up? But I don't think so. I mean, NXT, you got Cassius Ohno and Drew McIntyre. You have Adam Cole, O'Reilly, and Fish. New Japan, they had an incredible January 4th Tokyo Dome show. For those of you who don't know New Japan, that's basically its version of WrestleMania. You had Okada and Naito having an incredible match. You had Omega and Jericho. Cody, I think, Cody did fight on the show against Kota Ibushi, I think it was. And they had a great match, And Ring of Honor, speaking of Cody, they have Cody Rhodes, the former Cody Rhodes, now just Cody. You have Dalton Castle. You have the Motor City Machine Guns, the Young Bucks, Briscoe Brothers, Daniels Kazarian. They're having a tournament for his first women's champion. I'm not worried about the independent scene for professional wrestling. Look no further than those two if, you want an alternative to the WWE product. And the other thing I talked about is Daniel Bryan going to stay in the WWE? Of course, Daniel Bryan, great underdog story in the WWE. He attempted to come back after losing the WWE title to an injury, but then he got injured again. There was multiple concussions and a late discovery of a lesion on his brain, and he was forced to retire. He's now the general manager of SmackDown, but he wants to wrestle again. He apparently has clearance from doctors outside of the WWE, but he's not cleared by WWE's doctors, and now supposedly he might leave when his contract expires, and that would come in September, reportedly. So does Bryan pull the plug and leave? Maybe. If he does leave, which would be the ultimate sign of he's coming back to the ring, is he going to Ring of Honor? Is he going to New Japan? Somewhere else? Will he have a no-compete clause, which would possibly bump his re-debut to 2019? It's going to be interesting to see. So let's wrap things up with my 5 questions for boxing in the year. Okay, so here are my 5 questions for boxing for the year. First of all, what's up with boxing's heavyweight division? You have WBA champion Anthony Joshua, well, WBA IBF IBO champion to be specific, the WBC champion Deontay Wilder, and the WBO champion Joseph Parker. And we've got some title matches. March 3rd, we're finally going to see Deontay Wilder against Luis Ortiz. And March 31st, we got Joshua and Parker unifying their titles. And it's expected that if Joshua wins, there's a good chance we will get Joshua versus Wilder to determine once and for all who is the greatest heavyweight in the world today. They're looking to possibly have the first undisputed unified heavyweight champion in boxing since Lennox Lewis did it at the end of the 1990s. When it comes to Wilder and Ortiz, I'm going to go with Wilder in this one. I'm going to hope that Wilder will win. Ortiz has, failed drug tests before. Wilder has been defending his belt. He had to take on Bermane Stiverne, I think, back in November, and he crushed him. Ortiz will be a test, but I think Wilder can pull through with it. And that leaves us with Joshua and Parker. Now, I say if Joshua wins, Wilder will confront him and, will possibly get a unification bout between Joshua and Wilder. And I only say that because if Parker wins, Joshua supposedly has a rematch clause, which could mean the two will have to have rematches first before anything. Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker, by the way, has been going off on social media and interviews basically saying that Joshua has a glass chin. And I don't want to say Joshua has a glass chin, but when he faced who did he face in October? Because I know he was supposed to fight one person. Oh, it's Takam. That was Takam. Because I remember that he was originally supposed to face Pulev. That's right. He was supposed to face Kubrat Pulev. But Carlos Takam had to step in last minute because of an injury. And Takam went 10 rounds, and people are saying, he didn't finish him until late in the fight. That's not good. Well, remember, this is still the man who produced a fight of the year with Vladimir Klitschko, who produced a great upset in boxing history with Vladimir Klitschko. And maybe we gotta give Takam credit. I gave Takam credit, and he still kind of dominated Takam. He didn't have to necessarily get the knockout. He was still dominating the fight. Meanwhile, Deontay Wilder actually inserted some opinion on the Joshua Parker match, and he said potentially Parker, he needs a knockout. He'll have to finish Joshua to win the fight, especially since they're fighting in Wales, which is where Joshua has fought pretty much his whole career. He's 20-0. Every fight's been in England. He is the British superstar. Parker, of course, from Australia. Or is he New Zealand? He's New Zealand. But he's from Oceania. Let's say that. He's from Oceania. I don't know, man. I want to give Parker, his due, but I watched his fight with Hughie Fury, and I was just not impressed. It was absolutely boring. I was not into it. I think Joshua is the better fighter, and I think we will get Joshua versus Wilder. We will find out between the two of them who is the greatest champion today. So, moving on from that, second of all, is Tyson Fury going to return to the ring? Because he has his license back. So now, against whom is he going to fight? When and where? What are the details? Who's going to be his first match back? How is he going to insert himself into the heavyweight title scene again after vacating his titles and being removed from boxing about a year and a half ago? what's going to happen? I'm curious to know. I think he needs a couple of tune-up bouts, and we should deal with the Joshua Parker Wilder heavyweight title situation before we even begin to talk about Fury possibly coming back and fighting for their title. Gennady Golovkin versus Canelo Alvarez 2. It's May 5th. We just need to know if it's in T-Mobile Arena again or if it's going to be in MSG. But finally, we're going to get an answer to who potentially is the greatest middleweight right now. Is it Gennady Golovkin? Is it Canelo Alvarez? And of course, Billy Joe Saunders is probably awaiting the winner, the WBO champion, because the WBO belt is the one belt that Gennady Golovkin is missing from his little collection. But hopefully there will be no undeserved 118-110 Canelo score. Hopefully it won't end in a draw again. Hopefully we can get an answer, and then we'll have a little showdown with Billy Joe Saunders. And the only other stuff, really, what's next for Terence Crawford and Vasyl Lomachenko? Crawford has already vacated at least 2 of his light welterweight titles. He's jumping to welterweight. Supposedly he's going to challenge Jeff Horn for the WBO welterweight title in April. It's going to be interesting because Crawford became the first champion in boxing to unify any weight classes titles since 2005. And Vasyl Lomachenko, he's the WBO super featherweight champion. He's taken the pound-for-pound rankings by storm. They don't know if he's going to stay at 130. Supposedly he lacks options at 130. And I don't see any competition for him at 130. So maybe he moves up to 135. We don't know. And lastly, is Dana White going to jump to boxing? At the end of last month, we had Dana White and Floyd Mayweather making headlines. Rumors were that Mayweather may have been signing with the UFC. And supposedly, it was just the talk of potentially Dana White jumping to boxing because he said for a little while now that he wants boxing under the umbrella of the UFC. He was gone around during Mayweather-McGregor's press tour and everything. He had a Zuffa boxing shirt on. We haven't had many updates about Zuffa potentially being in the boxing world. And that was the company, of course, for those who don't know Zuffa, that owned the UFC from 2001 until they sold it to WME-IMG in 2016. So, are we going to have boxing under the umbrella for UFC? Could we see progress on it? We don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Combat Mania. Go like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope at Combat Mania UD. Go like and follow the Undetermined Podcast Network itself at the UD Network on Facebook and Twitter. Go like and follow all the rest of the Undetermined Podcast Network accounts. And that's going to do it. I'm Tom Albano. We'll see you next time on Combat Mania. Cheap Seat Sports Production Party, Undetermined Podcast Network.